enjoyed this film so much. Mm, it was like being in an artistic candy store of imagination for me.
Well, thank you. It's a nice way of putting it.
I really, really loved it. And I'm most interested in how you were able to work with Gabriel Byrne on the two Becketts, because unlike most of the films or TV things that I've seen where actors are playing the same part, they seemed extremely close together. I can't imagine that was easy to shoot.
One of the main challenges of the script, if you're Gabriel, is that there are two versions of the same character and they have to play against each other. And we had a very low budget, so we couldn't do it in a fancy sort of Marvel comic universe way. It had to be done in camera, which made it very fiddly and very difficult, actually, because it's time consuming. And Gabriel has to then play, one character who's a bit like the other character, but he's different. So, and the other thing that made this quite difficult was normally in a production, you don't choose to do the most difficult thing first. You want to get the characters warmed up and then you embark upon something like this. But we had to do this on day one at 6 o'clock in the morning. Our first setup was shooting the two Becketts for reasons I won't bore you with. Which both Graham and I thought, this is terrible. We've got to do this really difficult thing straight away. How's it going to go? So we started off, but we're doing it in camera. So we put Gabriel on one side of the frame, and on the other side of the frame is a tennis ball on a stick, which he's talking to. He then talks to that, then he does this side of the character. Then he changes costume. Then he goes on this side and becomes where the tennis ball was. That becomes him, and the tennis ball goes here. And it was kind of difficult. It didn't really work very well. The first morning, it was kind of hard to do. So then we replaced the tennis ball with a person, which was me initially. Then it was also the assistant director, and that became much easier. He was talking to a person, and that made it work. So it was difficult, and it's very challenging for an actor to do that because it's fiddly. And you can't go into certain parts, and you can't move into certain parts of the frame. You've got to be like this, or you can do that. And so it was difficult. And also you have to act, against yourself. And so it's a real challenge for an actor to do this, particularly with a low budget film. But I think we pulled it off. At least I hope we did.
Yeah,
That becomes
I would say
the
so.
film.
I would say so because I was very intrigued. You know what else I was intrigued about? There's so many films nowadays that don't leave stuff up to the audience's imagination. Like they just spell it out for you in a bazillion different ways. And I love that the most intimate scene in the film was kind of like, it was like moment placed where he
Mm.
sleeps with Suzanne for the first time. I loved that because it left up to our imagination how they were intimate. We didn't need to see it. What was the decision to do it that
For you.
way?
So I think it's always better when films allow the audience to make discoveries and put things together for themselves. And so we've done that quite a bit in this film, as you gathered. And I think it's sort of the way I like to watch films is when the film gives you some respect for your intelligence. That you can do this because you're not, you're there to see a film, you're there to engage with the film and interact with it a bit as well. So I'm glad that worked for you because it was something
It
that
totally worked for me. And I remember you doing something similar to this when you did the theory of everything. That's like a signature thing for you, I think, with your filmmaking. And I love that because it makes me go, oh,
mm,
it leaves it up to my imagination to figure out how things went down. And I can respect that. And I love it very much. Um,
it also allows you to avoid, sometimes sex scenes, to be blunt, which I always find to be, if they're in a film, they have to be there for a reason. They have to tell you something more than just, well, they've had, that kind of intimacy. And
exactly.
so, I'm always very kind of wary of them because they're always awkward to do and they have to have a point to them. Something has to progress in them, not just the progress for all that, because you can imply it. And, the old fashioned way of doing it wasn't so terrible,
No,
well, into the bedroom, close the door. Not that I'm being a prude about it, but it just feels like that's something that you can do. Everyone knows, well, they're going to come together. So do we need to show everything about that? So
exactly.
in
We
this,
don't need to
we
see
don't,
everything. We don't need to see every iota of a
Well,
movie.
it doesn't
We
have
don't.
any progression in the narrative or the themes, and you don't actually. It's like you don't see people having their dinner or going to the toilet. It's like these things happen every day, and
Love you,
you
James.
know,
You're
you
hilarious.
know, if you're lucky, or not. So, you have to show those things that are given in a relationship or in a life, daily or weekly, whatever your style is in that regard. I feel like I'm getting more and more kind of compromised here, but yeah, so I'm glad that works for you, and I think it does work for audiences generally as well.
Yeah, it really, really did. And another thing that I noticed about your filmmaking is that you're really big on imagery. Like there was that moment with the moth to the flame. There was a moth and a flame, and it
Yeah.
was indicative of Suzanne and Sam. And then there was the other moment when Suzanne's life ceases to exist, and their hands are placed in his hand is placed on top of hers, and their wedding rings almost touch, but not really, which was very indicative of how their life was throughout the
Well, I'm
film.
glad you picked up because I did that so carefully, and I thought, well, not many people are going to get that, but I'm
Oh,
so glad
I got
you
it.
did. Oh, good.
Immediately I
That
got
made
that.
my day, to be honest. But
Immediately I got that. I loved that.
good. I'm so pleased.
I am huge
Um,
on imagery. That's why I love talking to directors. I'm not your normal run of the mill film critic because and probably because I'm a woman, I pick up on things that probably a woman would pick up on. Like a woman would look at that and see those two rings
mm.
perpendicular to each other and be like, oh, they're not, because he could have placed his hand with the ring right on top of the ring,
Well,
but
this was something we did very deliberately, and so I mean, you do these things. Sometimes you think, well, I know it's there. The actors know it's there. And we've done it for a reason, but not everyone's going to pick up on this. But I think generally, as a filmmaker, you look to distill things into images if you can, to stand for things. It's a visual medium. You want to be able to create images that tell you something, that give you information, but give you something else as well, something maybe aesthetic as well as information. And you can do grace notes, which I think that was one of them, sometimes quite consciously with an image that can stand for something. So I'm glad that that our efforts weren't in vain,
oh,
basically.
not with me, they weren't. They were right on time. There was something else that stuck out to me as well. How can I say this? So in this film, I felt like we were seeing how pain informs Samuel Beckett's life and his imagination, right? What has informed your imagination as a director? We talked about a lot of things that inform you as a director, but we have
Indeed, what an interesting question. Well, I mean, I think it's obviously there's other films, they really inform you too. Particularly when you're younger and you see things that really have a big when you're young, as a not even a filmmaker, when things have a big impression on you, you kind of internalize the impact of certain things. So obviously, movies for all directors or all filmmakers are a huge reference point for their imagination, what people have done before, how they've done it. I mean, the world around you is another great place that every day you can be you know revitalized by just keeping your eyes and ears open. Listening to things is also often what I do, just to pick up on things. And also I love photography and photographs. I find them very enriching. In fact, this film was very much influenced by a photographer called Brashai, and it's spelled Brassai, who shot very beautiful black and white photographs of Paris in the 1930s and 1940s. And some of the scenes in the film are directly inspired by his work. So these things inspire you too. And I think in sort of emotional terms, I think your own life does. You do, you go through stuff in life, and you kind of, you get scars, as Beckett has scars too. And those things, your own relationship, Fear of Everything, it was a film I made about 10 years ago. Definitely, you draw upon your own emotional sort of complications with people and your own relationships to understand that relationship and to guide the actors a bit. So I think you look within and you look without, basically, on a daily basis.
I love that. Thank you so much for breaking that down for me because I'm a fan of your work, I really wanted to know, how you tick a little bit. But that is my time, James Marsh.
Well, thank you. What a nice conversation. Thank you so much for your, perception on the film, and very nice to talk to you too. You have these sort of treadmill sort of interviews, and sometimes you're kind of, enjoying them, and sometimes you're just getting through them. But this was one I've enjoyed, so thank you very much.
I appreciate that. And ditto, I enjoyed this one as well. Thank
Great.
you so very much.
Thank you.